Today we are talking about some wild German variants of Beauty and the Beast. The original Beauty and the Beast that most of us are familiar with is a French one written by a French woman named Gabrielle Barbeau de Villeneuve. Sorry, I'm not French. That's what the Disney version is loosely based on, but there are variants in many cultures. Way older in the 1500s is the Pig King from Italy, which I talked about in my last video. These three German ones we're talking about today are just as wild, with a little less murder. So the first one we're going to start with is called The Summer and Winter Garden by the Brothers Grimm. It starts the way the original Beauty and the Beast does, and the way lots of fairy tales do, where a merchant or some man has three daughters and he's about to go on a trip and he asks them each what they want. And the first two ask for normal things like a satin dress or jewels. And the third one asks for something weird and different. In the original Beauty and the Beast, the French version, and in this version, the third girl asks for a rose. In the German version, this is a very difficult thing to ask for, however, because it's the dead middle of winter, so where's he gonna find a rose? On his way home, he happens upon this castle that seems uninhabited in this magical garden that is half summer, half winter. And on the summer half, there's roses, so he picks one and he takes it home. But on his way home, he is riding his horse and he hears someone following him, and he turns around and this giant black beast, all we're given is that it's black, no other details, says, "You took my rose, I'm gonna kill you." I was like, "It's for my daughter, the most beautiful, wonderful girl in the world." And the beast is like, "Okay, take my rose and then I'm gonna come get your daughter in 8 days. And he goes home like, I bet he didn't mean that. But he did, and 8 days later he shows up with a carriage, bursts into the house, and he's like, "I'm taking what's mine," and our girl screams, but he grabs her and takes her away. However, the traditional Stockholm Syndrome eventually kicks in. He takes her to his palace, he treats her really well, there's music and all the food she could want, and it's beautiful, and there's entertainment. It says he was dear to her, and she eventually grew fond of him. Just like in the French version, one day she's like, "I really want to see my family again," and he's like, "Well, I've got this magic mirror." Disney was correct on this one. "Look in this mirror, you can see your family." And she looks and sees that her dad is like dying from a broken heart because he feels bad about what happened to her. She's like, "Can I go home to my dad?" And the beast is like, "Yeah, but you got to come back in 8 days. 8 days is always the thing in this story." So she goes home, and in the French version, the dad gets better when she goes home, but in the Grimm version, he dies. He's happy to see her, but it's too late. She gets so swept up in the burial and the funeral and her grief that she suddenly realizes the 8 days have passed and she hasn't gone back. So she hurries back to the beast. And this part's just specifically weird in the most German way. She goes around looking for the beast, and she finds this giant mound of cabbage heads, and it's like gross, rotting, wet cabbage, and she digs through it and finds the beast like dying and near death underneath the cabbages. She clears away the old rotten cabbages, and she like gets a bucket of water and pours it on him. That is what transforms him into a handsome prince. Not saying she loves him, not saying she'll marry him, not kissing him, pouring a bucket of water on him after finding him under a pile of rotting cabbages. So German, so Brothers Grimm. Mwah. If you watch my other videos, like Snow White does not get woken up by a kiss or magic. A servant drops her out of the casket while the prince is taking her, for some reason, to his palace, and she coughs up the apple. The point is, Disney made up magic kisses, and these are messier and so much better, in my opinion. Obviously, then they live happily ever after. This next German one is called Little Broomstick, and it starts out very similarly. Merchant asked his three daughters what they want, and in this one, the third daughter really doesn't want anything. She's like, "I just want you to return home safely, father." But he keeps saying, "Let me bring you something, bring you something." And so she picks a rose in the dead of winter just because she doesn't think he'll find one, and she doesn't want anything. Also, she gets a name. Her name is Netchen, and Little Broomstick is the name of like her maid slash friend. Her dad's like a broomstick dealer. They call her Little Broomstick. Anyway, same thing happens. He finds this magical garden, and he takes this rose, and this beast that is described as having like a long snout, gross fur, huge tusks, jumps out, and he's gonna kill him. And he's like, "No, it's for my daughter." And he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna come for your daughter in 7 months, and then you don't have to die." He comes home super sad, does not tell Netchen what's happening. He does tell the older two daughters, who are specifically bad people in this story. They take wicked pleasure in the fact that she's gonna be taken off by a beast because they've always been jealous of her. The dad does Little Broomstick so dirty. So the beast shows up 7 months later in a carriage, and he's like, "Hey, Little Broomstick, come here." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Hey, beast, here she is," and gives him Little Broomstick, claiming she's his daughter. But somehow the beast recognizes the deception, and he gives her back, and he's like, no, give me the real one. And little Broomstick like hugs Netchin, and Netchin's like, oh my god, where were you? What happened? But then Netchin gets pulled away and the beast takes her. Now in this one, like the Pig King, the Italian one I talked about last time, it's very specific that she sleeps with him, that he becomes her nightly sleeping companion in the palace, and that through that she eventually grows fond of him. It says she grew less and less afraid of him. He cuddled up to her and she stroked his shaggy coat and even allowed him to touch her lips with his long cold snout. Until one day she wakes up and he's not in bed with her, and she goes looking for him and he's like stretched out on the lawn. She thinks he's dead, so she cries on him, and her tears are what transforms him into a beautiful prince, because that was his curse apparently. Now what's different about this story is it doesn't end there. Netchin and the now prince go back to her family, and the sisters get so jealous that they murder her. They get her in the bath, force her under the water, and drown her. But then the magic fairy that originally cursed the prince shows up, and she's like, not cool, ladies. She brings her back to life with her magic wand, and she's like, all right, murder sisters, prepare to die. Netchin begs for their lives. She's like, please don't kill my sister. And the fairy's like, as long as they live, they're gonna try and kill you. And so Netchin's like, okay, well then do what you want with them. And so she turns them into stone and curses them that they will remain stone statues until some man falls in love with them. But the fairy even says, which will never happen. Little Broomstick remains Netchin's best friend, and she goes to live with them in the palace, and they live happily ever after. So the last one, and this one would make the best horror movie. This German one is called Little Nut Twig, and it's because the third daughter, instead of a rose, asks her dad to bring back a twig from a nut tree. So he picks it when he finds some in the forest, and this bear jumps out. He's like, ah, you took my nut twig. Or I'm gonna eat you. And he's like, no, please don't eat me. Here's some ham and sausage. He's like, I don't want that. He's like, instead, give me the first thing that greets you on your way home. And he agrees to it. And of course, the first thing that greets him when he comes home is the third daughter who asked for the nut twig. So he tells her, oh no, you've been promised to a bear, but she is very brave and says, I will fulfill the promise. Like the other story, they try to trick him. They give him the herdsman's ugly daughter, and he takes her in the carriage and he says, tussle me, scuffle me, soft and gentle behind my ears, or I will eat you skin and bones, with his head in her lap. And so she starts to kind of pet him, but apparently it's not the way he liked. Somehow he knows that means she's fake. And so he's about to eat her, but she runs out of the carriage and he's like, you guys tricked me. And so our main girl is like, I will go with the bear. And they're in the carriage, he says the same thing, but she pets him in a way that pleases him. And this pacified him and he became friendly. Anyway, here's where it gets really horrifying. He doesn't live in a palace, he lives in a cave, and he takes her and he's like, we're gonna go in my cave. You have to be happy and nice or my wild animals will tear you apart. So they go into a room filled with worms and he says, do not look around left or right. Stay straight ahead and then you'll be safe. Very Willy Wonka in the tunnel to me. He obeys him, they go through a room of snakes, but she looks straight ahead. After they walk through rooms of horrible creatures, they come into a beautiful place with music and light. There's a clap of thunder and the cave turns into a beautiful palace, and all of the gross things turn into people/servants, and the bear turns into a handsome prince. He's like, you broke the spell by walking through the horrible gross things without flinching or looking around. And of course they live happily ever after, and I guess the message is just grin and bear it, get through the horrible disgusting stuff, and you'll be a princess at the end. If you want to follow me on Instagram, this is what I am on Instagram. Check out my podcast, Folk Tales and Fairy Lore, Andrea Lynn. Also my book, Dust Spells, which is a reimagining of another German grim fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses. Also, someone suggested I make a YouTube channel and upload my videos there in case something does happen to TikTok. So this is where I am on YouTube. I'm slowly uploading videos there. I just have 7 now, but I'll have all 60 there soon. And yeah, 4 subscribers, so subscribe. And if someone asks you what to bring them back from their journey, just say a keychain or a snow globe or something.